Greetings. Today I want to talk about some of the historically notable people of southeastern Indiana. I will use some of the historical markers located around the region as a reference point. My book, Southeast Indiana Day Trips, from my Road Trip Indiana series, includes every historical marker installed by the Indiana Historical Bureau in the region. In the book, I include the text of the marker as well as some background information to give the marker more context. Historical markers, ignored by many, can give some interesting insights into the events, people, and places of a city, town, or village. Many of the topics of the markers are not well known. I will now talk about some of the interesting people of history of southeastern Indiana. Our first stop is in Henryville in Clark County, which is the birthplace of a very famous American, Colonel Harlan Sanders. You will find this marker at the intersection of Indiana State Road 160 and the northbound entrance ramp of Interstate 65 in Henryville. Marker text states simply, founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken. I have expanded on this rather brief recounting of his life. Colonel Harlan David Sanders lived from September the 9th, 1890 until December the 16th, 1980. Harlan Sanders' life exemplifies the rags to riches story that comprises much of American experience. Colonel Sanders rose above poverty, failure, and economic depression to eventually find success and launch the modern fast food franchise model. His resume includes stints as a life insurance salesman, steam engine stoker, railway worker, secretary, and entrepreneur. His fiery temper got him involved in brawls and made him the bane of early franchise holders that did not adhere to his strict standards. His mother, Margaret Ann Dunleavy Sanders, gave birth to him in their four-room home near Henryville, Indiana. He was the eldest of four children born by her and her husband Wilbur David Sanders. Wilbur's died suddenly from a fever when Harlan was 5 years old. His mother found work in a cannery and was absent for long periods, leaving Harlan to care for the younger children. During these years, Harlan learned how to cook, using food the children foraged while their mother was away. At age 10, two local farmers hired the boy as a farmhand. His mother eventually remarried and the family moved to Greenwood, Indiana. In the 7th grade, Harlan dropped out of school and moved to live with a farmer to do farm work. For a time, he lived with an uncle in New Albany, working as a streetcar conductor. He falsified his age and joined the military in 1906. After serving as a teamster in Cuba, he received an honorary discharge and went to Alabama to serve stints as a blacksmith helper and ash pan cleaner at a railroad. He eventually rose to become a fireman, stoking the steam engines with coal. From Alabama, Harlan went to Tennessee. He worked days as a fireman and studied law at night at the LaSalle Extension University. A fight with a co-worker cost him his job, so he moved on to Arkansas, married by now with 2 daughters. A son had died of tonsillitis. In Little Rock, Arkansas, he became a lawyer until a courtroom brawl with his client ended his law career. He ended up again in Indiana, this time operating a ferry company that he established. The ferry operated between Jeffersonville, Indiana, and Louisville, Kentucky, and did very well. During this time, he also worked as a secretary for the Columbus, Indiana Chamber of Commerce. He resigned that job, sold the ferry company, and used the funds to found a company that made acetylene lamps. This company failed. Sanders ended up in North Corbin, Kentucky, operating a service station that he rented free in exchange for a percentage of the sales. To make extra money, he started selling fried chicken, country ham, country fried steak dinners. His chicken was a hit. His restaurant became so popular that the Kentucky governor, Ruby LaFoon, commissioned him as a Kentucky colonel in 1935. During this time, he was involved in a shootout with his biggest competitor, Matt Stewart. Sanders, a Shell Oil official with Sanders, and Stewart got into an altercation over Stewart repainting some of Sanders' signs. He was directing people to his station and away from Sanders. During the altercation, Stewart pulled a gun and shot the Shell Oil man, killing him. His murder conviction eliminated him as a competitor. By 1940, Sanders perfected his fried chicken recipe. He had opened a new 140-seat restaurant in Asheville, North Carolina. When the war started, the government started rationing gas for the war effort. All tourism stopped, forcing Sanders to close the restaurant. In 1952, Sanders began selling franchises for his recipe. He would go to a restaurant around the country and cook for the owner and employees. He often slept in his car while on these trips. If they liked his chicken, he would offer to sell them the franchise. He would claim a royalty of 4 cents per chicken. He sold his first franchise in 1952 to a restaurant owner in Salt Lake City, Utah. His fledgling company grew, and by 1964, he sold the company to the Kentucky Fried Chicken Corporation. He received $2 million for his company. At the time of the sale, the chain had over 600 franchises in the United States and overseas. The company went public with stock sales in 1966. Hubeland Incorporated acquired the company in 1971 for $250 million. There were over 3,500 franchises worldwide at the time. Harlan moved to Louisville, where he died of leukemia in 1980. His body lay in state at the state capitol in Frankfort. His grave lies in Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky. At his death, there was an estimated 6,000 Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises around the world. He did not do too badly for a poor farm boy from Henryville, Indiana. The next stop on this historical personality tour is in New Trenton, Indiana, in Franklin County, Indiana, at the intersection of US 52 and St. Peter's Road. Marker text: Side 1, magician, humorist, and innovator Lester Lake was born in New Trenton. He began performing magic as a profession in Brookville by 1925 and was inducted to the Queen City Mystics Assembly 11 of the Society of American Magicians the same year. He traveled extensively, performing at parks, theaters, schools, and nightclubs from 1925 through 1960. He toured Europe with USO during World War II. Side 2, Lake is credited with developing a wide array of tricks and illusions, including Burned Alive in 1929, the Guillotine in 1931, and Dissecto in 1942. He developed new magic tricks independently and later became an associate of Abbott's Magic Company in Michigan. His contribution to the field included many magicians, as such New Trenton native John Calvert. Here's a little bit more about this fascinating man. Lester Marvello Lake lived from July 1904 until August 1977. The son of Clarence and Elizabeth Great Batch Lake, Lester was native to New Trenton, Indiana, in Franklin County. He and another New Trenton boy destined to become a magician named John Calvert became friends while boys and performed together. Lake began his performances in Brookville in 1925. By 1927, he became part of the stable of performers on the magnificent showboat Goldenrod, which sailed on the Mississippi, Ohio, and Missouri rivers. He invented many of the famous tricks still used by magicians today, including the famous Harry Houdini. During the 1940s, he hosted a spook show, which was a special live magic show usually done around Halloween. During World War II, he traveled with USO performing for troops fighting overseas. He invented many tricks while on his own and developed many more while associated with the Michigan Abbott's Magic Company. He receives credit for developing over 300 tricks and illusions. The tricks he devised includes the Arm Chopper Dissecto, Burned Alive, Lester Lake Guillotine, and Buried Alive. Lake was a regular performer on the television show You Asked For It and was inducted in the Queen City Mystics Assembly 11 of the Society of American Magicians on River in central Alaska. The next year, the Army transferred him to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, when tensions arose with Mexico during their Civil War. At the beginning of World War I, Woodville was serving with the 60th Infantry Regiment. The regiment received assignment to deploy to Europe as part of the 5th Infantry Division with General John Pershing in command. The need for more officers led to his promotion first to first lieutenant and later to second lieutenant by July the 11th, 1917. Woodville and Lorena Blossom Wiltshire married on December the 27th, 1917, prior to his shipping out. His regiment formed part of the defensive force occupying the region between Meuse, France, and the Argonne Forest in northwestern France in August of 1918. The Allies, consisting of Britain, the United States, and France, began what would become the final offensive action in the year when they initiated the Meuse-Argonne Offensive in September the 26th, 1918. The action cost 26,277 American lives, 28,000 German lives, and lasted 45 days. This offensive consisted of 3 phases and ended when the Allies and Germany signed an armistice on November 11, 1918. Early in Phase 2, Woodville's company had reached the Consul, France, and were advancing towards enemy lines in a thick fog when machine gun fire erupted. Woodville noted the muzzle flashes that came from a church tower in the village about 300 yards away. Using the marksmanship skills he learned as a boy near Madison, he studied the tower. He could not see the gunner. However, he aimed his rifle at the spot he judged the man's head would be and fired. 4 men in succession attempted to occupy the tower. However, he killed them as they appeared. Another German soldier emerged from the emplacement and attacked Woodfill in hand-to-hand combat. Woodfill managed to kill his attacker with his pistol. His company continued their advance when a second machine gun located in a stable opened up. Woodfill aimed carefully at the position and silenced that gun with 1 shot. They continued advancing carefully, taking cover when a third machine gun began firing at them. The Germans had earlier deployed mustard gas, which Woodfill and his men were exposed to. Suffering the effects, Woodfill crawled to a nearby ditch about 40 yards away from the gun emplacement and shot the gunner and 4 of his replacements. He used his pistol to dispatch 2 more enemy soldiers. After reloading, he shot a German sniper out of a tree. His company once again began advancing. However, a 5th machine gun began firing. Woodfill once more led the charge against this gun and killed 5 men. He jumped into the pit. The 2 remaining occupants began firing at him. As he was not in a position to shoot, he picked up a pickaxe lying in the pit and battered his attackers to death. The mustard gas and exhaustion from his exertions had its effect. Medics evacuated him from the battlefield, and he spent the next 10 weeks in the hospital. The damage to his lungs from the mustard gas bothered him for the rest of his life. Army General John Pershing awarded Woodfill with the Medal of Honor on February the 19th, 1919, promoting him to captain at the same time. He was one of the pallbearers at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier on November the 11th, 1921, at Arlington National Cemetery. After returning to Fort Campbell in Kentucky, Woodfill left the Army. Civilian life did not suit him, so he re-enlisted 3 weeks later as a sergeant. Woodfill retired from the Army with a pension in 1923. However, it was inadequate for him and his wife to live comfortably. Local Democrats attempted to enlist him to run for Congress. However, he demurred. When World War II began, the Army recalled him to service, giving him a special exemption to serve in 1942. He received assignment to Fort Benning, Georgia, to serve as instructor at 59 years of age and as a major. When he turned 60 the next year, his wife died. He had hit the mandatory retirement age of 60, so he left the Army and retired to a farm near Vevey, Indiana. Searchers found his body in a field on August 13, 1951, having died of natural causes. He was initially interred at Jefferson County Cemetery near Madison, Indiana. However, the efforts of United States Representative Earl Wilson had his body moved to Arlington National Cemetery, Section 14, Grave 642, in October 1955. Our next stop is in Kent, Indiana. Harvey Washington Wiley, native to Kent, Indiana, led the effort to pass the Food and Drug Act of 1906 and the establishment of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. A marker noting the site of his birth is found at the corner of State Road 256 and County Road 850, West Kent, Indiana, in Jefferson County. This marker is located just west of Kent. Marker text, born near Kent, Jefferson County, Dr. Wiley graduated from Hanover College in 1867 and received his medical degree from Indiana Medical College in 1871. He taught at Butler and Purdue universities. As chief chemist for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, he led the nationwide movement that culminated in the Food and Drug Act of 1906 and the establishment of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. I've got just a little bit more on his life that I've written. Harvey Washington Wiley lived from October the 18th, 1844 through June the 16th, 1930. Born in a log cabin to Preston Richard Wiley and Lucinda Maxwell near Kent, Indiana, Harvey obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree from nearby Hanover College and a medical degree from the Indiana University School of Medicine, as well as a Bachelor of Science from Lawrence Scientific School, Harvard. Wiley became a chemist and led a movement for better food labeling. His efforts led to the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 and later establishment of the Food and Drug Administration. His life achievements led to his moniker, the Father of the Food and Drug Administration. His father ran a subscription school during the winter months when farm work was slack. Sensitive to his son's intelligence, he made sure the boy got a good education. He attended nearby Hanover University until 1863. At 19, he enlisted in the Union Army to fight in the Civil War. He served as a corporal in Company 1 of the 137th Regiment, Indiana Volunteers. When the war concluded, he returned to Hanover, graduating in 1867. He obtained a medical degree from Indiana University Medical School in 1871 and a Bachelor of Science from Lawrence Scientific School in 1873. He joined Purdue University and then became Indiana State Chemist, a post he served at until 1883. In that year, he received appointment to head the division, later Bureau of Chemistry in the U.S. Department of Agriculture. His work as an analytical chemist led to him becoming concerned about food quality, ingredients, and labeling. During this time, food labeling bills saw the introduction into Congress only to die at the hands of various powerful established lobbies. To make his point, Wiley organized a group of young men that became known as his Poison Squad. These volunteers tested food ingredients on themselves and recorded the results. The publicity gained by this caused the major food canners and finally support the bill and voluntarily abandon some of the ingredients that they used. Congress passed the law on June 30th, 1906, and President Theodore Roosevelt signed it into law. The law led to the formation of the United States Food and Drug Administration. After the law passed, Wiley resigned his government post to take a position with the Good Housekeeping magazine. He became head of the Bureau of Food, Sanitation, and Health for Good Housekeeping. Using the resources of the magazine, Wiley continued his work of testing food. His work was instrumental in the Good Housekeeping label seal of approval, still a coveted award for any product or food. Wiley died at his Washington, D.C. home and is interred in Arlington National Cemetery. From Kent, we travel to Madison, Indiana. Famous movie actress Irene Dunne had deep roots in Madison. A marker honoring her achievements is located at 105 East Main Street in Jefferson County. Marker text, Side 1. Born in Louisville, Kentucky, 1898. After father's death, moved with family to Madison. Graduated from Madison High School in 1916. After voice training in Indianapolis and Chicago, she began singing professionally. Won lead in Roadshow at Florence Ziegfeld's Showboat in 1929. Began Hollywood career in 1930 in 42 films and nominated for 5 Academy Awards. Side 2. Dunne maintained ties with Madison, which honored her. She helped with the restoration of the Broadway fountain in 1976. She received the Laterre Medal from University of Notre Dame in 1949. President Dwight Eisenhower named her an alternate delegate to the United Nations General Assembly in 1957, was Kennedy Center Honors Awardee in 1985, died in 1990 in Los Angeles. A brief history of her. Irene Dunne lived from December the 20th, 1898 until September the 4th, 1990. The daughter of a steamboat inspector and concert pianist instructor, Irene Dunne lived up to her father's dying advice, saying, quote, "Happiness is never an accident. It is the prize we get when we choose wisely from life's great stories," unquote. Her parents were Joseph Dunne and Adeline Henry Dunne. Adeline gave birth to her daughter in Louisville, Kentucky. Her father died when Irene was 12. The family moved to Madison, Indiana to live with their grandparents. Irene debuted in a music career at 5, performing a Midsummer Night's Dream in Louisville. Her mother taught her to play the piano when she was young. She took voice lessons in Madison and continued to play the piano. Upon graduating from Madison High School in 1916, she went on to Indianapolis to study in a music conservatory. She won a singing contest at the Chicago Musical College. She went on to New York, auditioning for the Metropolitan Opera Company. She was rejected. However, she gained a gig with a road theater company and landed parts in several plays. After a performance in the Showboat, Hollywood movie moguls caught wind of her. She signed a contract with RKO Pictures. She added an E to her surname, went on to perform in several movies, was nominated once to the Academy Awards. She ended her movie career in 1952. She has been described as the best actress that never won an Academy Award. She did get 5 Best Actress Awards and many other honors and medals. She went on to serve as President Dwight D. Eisenhower's delegate to the United Nations. In later life, she contributed time and money to civic organizations. She maintained ties with Madison, donating $10,000 to the town's fountain restoration. She married Dr. Francis Griffin, a marriage that produced one daughter. The company remained married until Dr. Griffin's death in 1965. A marker near Butlerville, Indiana, at the intersection of US 50 and County Road 325 North, Butlerville notes the birthplace of the United States President Richard Nixon Milhouse's mother. Marker text: Mother of President Richard M. Nixon was born on a farm about 4.5 miles southeast, which her grandparents came to in 1854. Hannah's parents moved to California in 1897 when she was 12 years old. I've got just a little bit more written about the lady. Hannah Milhouse Nixon, March the 7th, 1885 through September the 30th, 1967. The daughter of Franklin Milhouse and Almira Park Berg, Hannah married Francis Anthony Nixon in Whittier, California on June the 25th, 1908. Richard Nixon's words about his mother from the White House after his mother's death in 1967 perhaps tell her story the best. They were, quote, "Nobody will ever write a book, probably, about my mother." Well, I guess all of you would say this about your mother. My mother was a saint. I think of her 2 boys dying of tuberculosis, nursing 4 others in order that she could take care of my older brother for 3 years in Arizona, and seeing each of them die. When they died, it was like one of her own. Yes, she will have no books written about her, but she was a saint, unquote. In Osgood, Indiana, at the intersection of County Road 300 North and US 421, we find a marker honoring the inventor of an invaluable surveying tool, the Bilby Steel Tower. Marker text, side 1, Jasper Sherman Bilby, internationally known surveyor, moved to Ripley County by 1893, joined the U.S. Coast Guard and Geodetic Survey in 1894. He performed geodetic surveys accounting for the curvature of the earth for commercial and infrastructure purposes, invented the Bilby Tower 1926 through 1927, improved efficiency and cost. Herbert Hoover commended Bilby's invention in 1927. Side 2, Bilby's Tower allowed surveyors to sight over obstacles when measuring long distances. Made of steel instead of wood, they were reusable, portable, and quickly assembled. Saved the federal government $3,072,000 within the first 10 years of use. Used nationally and internationally for over 50 years, the resulting data served as a foundation to modern mapping and GPS systems. Got just a little bit more about Mr. Bilby. Jasper Sherman Bilby lived from July the 16th, 1864 until July the 18th, 1949. The son of Jasper N. Bilby and Margaret Hazard Bilby, Jasper was native to a farm near Rushville, Indiana, in Rush County. Forced to leave school in the 8th grade after his father died, Bilby helped support the family. He worked on the family farm in Fayette County until taking a job with the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey in September 1894. He married Luella Cox in 1891 and moved to Ripley County near Osgood, Indiana in 1893. He leased land at first for his family to live on while he was away doing survey work. He purchased land later on, first near Osgood, then near Holton in 1896, then back to Osgood in 1921. Bilby left the survey in 1894 to take a job as a foreman at the Holton Stone Quarry. After less than a year, he returned to the survey foreman on a C&GS triangulation party. He overcame his lack of formal education with hard work. Eventually, he would become a signalman. This job entailed using flags or lights to indicate points within a geometric calculation. This usually consisted of a point between 2 survey points to ensure the surveyors could make an accurate calculation. Bilby's work took him all over the United States, leaving his family in Ripley County for extended periods of time. He retired in 1937, having traveled 511,400 miles during his career. He retired to Batesville, where he passed away on July the 18th, 1949. He is interred in Washington Park Cemetery in Indianapolis. Bilby's work with the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey initially consisted of building wooden observation towers for the surveyors to use to make calculations concerning the longitude and latitude of the site they were surveying. Surveyors attempting to make accurate calculations had to contend with trees, buildings, hills, and other obstructions that blocked their observations. Thus, surveyors needed tall towers to climb above all the obstructions to make their observations. The wooden towers in use at the time required a great deal of time and expense to build and could only be used once. Bilby devised his tower in 1926. The tower consisted of two steel towers, one of which nested inside the other. The survey equipment rested on the inside tower while the surveyor used the outside tower to climb and make his observations. The two towers did not connect at any point, so any movements the surveyor made did not affect the instruments. The towers were quickly assembled and reusable. After the survey began using his improved tower, they saw immediate savings in both time and money. The tower found use all over the United States and in many foreign countries. They were used for many years. The last Bilby Tower erected in 1984. Satellite and GPS had displaced the Bilby Tower. However, these systems use much of the data collected by observers using the Bilby Tower. In Scott County, we find the William Hayden English home, the one-time residence of William Hayden English. The marker is located on State Road 203 on the north edge of Lexington on the west side of the highway at the entrance to English Park in Lexington, Scott County, Indiana. Marker text, English, 1822 through 1896, politician, banker, and historian, served as a Secretary of the 1850 Indiana Constitutional Convention, as Speaker of the Indiana House and in the U.S. House. Candidate for U.S. Vice President, 1880, President, Indiana Historical Society, Town of English, Indiana, named for him. William Hayden English lived from August the 27th, 1822 through February the 7th, 1896. The only son of Alicia Gale English and his wife Mahala Easton English, William was born in Lexington, Indiana. His parents had migrated from Kentucky in 1818. His father, Alicia, served in the Indiana State Legislature and built a successful business. William attended Hanover College in nearby Hanover after attending local public schools as a boy. He graduated in 3 years and studied law, gaining admittance to the bar at age 18 in 1840. He opened his practice in Scott County that year and attended the Democratic State Convention in Indianapolis as a delegate. Indiana Lieutenant Governor Jesse D. Bright met English and assisted him in his political career. English worked on the Democratic presidential candidate James K. Polk campaign, and as a reward, Polk appointed him as clerk in the Treasury Department in Washington, D.C. In 1850, he returned to Indiana and served as secretary during the Constitutional Convention for the Constitution of 1851. The Democrats held the majority of delegates and passed a new constitution easily. The Constitution restricted the voting franchise of blacks who had been able to vote under the previous Constitution. It also contained Article 13, which restricted movement of free blacks into the state. He won election to the first state assembly under the new Constitution in 1851. Because of his familiarity with the new Constitution, the House elected him as Speaker of the House. He served in that capacity until 1853. In 1853, he gained election to the United States House of Representatives. During his tenure, he served as an instrumental role in getting the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 passed, which nullified the Missouri Compromise. With the passage of the act, territories would be able to vote on the issue of slavery as opposed to banning slavery in the new territories. He served 8 terms in Congress and retired to private life in Scott County in 1861. English moved to Indianapolis in 1862 and helped organize the First National Bank of Indianapolis, remaining as president until 1877. During this time, he became involved in the Indianapolis Street Railway Company and ran that company until 1876. English also started several lucrative real estate ventures, constructing several commercial buildings, buying, renovating several buildings, and built a new opera house. Major General Winfield Scott Hancock won the nomination to the presidential candidate in 1880. English, who had remained in contact with local politics in Indiana, gained the vice presidential nomination. The ticket ran against the Republican slate of James A. Garfield and Chester A. Arthur. Garfield won the election. English returned to Indianapolis. After his return to Indianapolis, he resumed his business activities. He developed an interest in history and served as president of the Indiana Historical Society. During this time, he wrote 2 books and helped plan the Soldiers and Sailors Monument on Monument Circle. He died in the room of one of the hotels he built, the English Hotel. After lying in state at the Capitol, he was buried at Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis. The Indiana State House has a bust for English on display in the niche of the corner outside the rotunda facing east. Also in Scott County, we find the John Kimberlin Farm at 5765 South Westport Road, 0.2 miles northwest of State Road 362 near Nab, Indiana, in Scott County. The marker text, Side 1, Kimberlin, a Revolutionary War veteran, was the first person to purchase land in what is now Scott County. In 1804, he bought Tract 264 of land grant to soldiers of George Rogers Clark. His family settled 1805 in a well-built cabin northwest of here, cleared land, built fences, and farmed. He and his wife are buried in the cemetery southwest of here. Side 2, after the Pigeon Roost Massacre in September 1812, his cabin was converted to a fortified blockhouse and sheltered area settlers. Nearly 600 mounted volunteers from Kentucky and Indiana came to protect the area and camped on his land and used his supplies. He petitioned the U.S. Congress in 1832 for payment and received $150 in 1834. I've got a little bit more written about Mr. Kimberlin here. John Kimberlin lived from 1751 until 1835. A native of Virginia, Kimberlin served in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. After the war, he and his 2 sons, Daniel and Isaac, and wife Ruth, voyaged down the Ohio River by flatboat from Pennsylvania in April of 1805. The family settled on current Kimberlin Creek near a generous spring that still flows. Felling huge white oak trees, the Kimberlins built a cabin from the logs in near the spring. The white oak provided a sturdy cabin that stood until 1876. The militia converted this cabin to a blockhouse for protection against native attacks. John and his wife lie in a cemetery nearby in unmarked graves. The Scott County Cemetery Commission has cleared and restored the cemetery. We have all heard of Lake Mead in Colorado, but you may not know about the man the lake derives its name from. That honor belongs to a historic resident of Patriot, Indiana, named Dr. Elwood Mead. The marker noting his birthplace is located at the intersection of State Roads 250 and 156 west of Patriot in Switzerland County, Indiana. Marker text, engineer who made the desert bloom, Patriot, Indiana. Native, supervised Hoover Dam construction in Colorado, Lake Mead named for him. Appointed Director of U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, President Coolidge. Served under Presidents Hoover and Roosevelt, top authority on irrigation and reclamation. I've got just a little bit more written about Mr. Mead. Elwood Mead lived from January the 16th, 1858 through January the 26th, 1936. Born to Daniel and Lucinda Davis Mead near Patriot, Indiana, Elwood Mead attended Purdue University at Lafayette. While there, he attained a Bachelor of Science degree in 1882 and the MS degree in 1884. He served in the United States Engineer Corps from July 1882 until January 1883. He became one of the leading engineers in the drainage and irrigation field in the world. His reputation led to posts in the Colorado Agricultural College and the University of California. In 1907, he traveled to Australia to become chairman of the State Rivers and Water Supply Commission. He served in this post until 1915. President Calvin Coolidge appointed him as superintendent of the United States Bureau of Reclamation. During this time, he oversaw the construction of the Hoover, Grand Coulee, and Owie dams. Lake Mead is named after him. Of course, this is not a complete listing of all the historical personalities honored by the historical markers in this region. I have omitted markers covered in previous podcasts, as well as any pertaining to the Underground Railroad and Civil War topics, as I will cover these in a later podcasts. Find out more about these Indiana day trip destinations and many more by purchasing the book, Southeast Indiana Day Trips. The trip includes contact information location information for all of these markers, as well as information on state parks, nature preserves, golf courses, wineries, breweries, and much, much more. You can find it on my website, www.mossyfeetbooks.com, on the Road Trip Indiana category. Just scroll down to the categories, click on the Road Trip Indiana series, and there it is. There are links to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Play, and other online book retailers. You may choose to purchase the book in ebook or softbound versions. An audiobook version is also available on Google Play. There will be 4 more podcasts in this series covering some of the historical markers, courthouses, and Underground Railroad sites in the southeastern part of the state. At the conclusion of this series, I will compile the episodes into an audiobook. The next series will cover Indiana's role in the Civil War. Listeners may also be interested in my book, The Ultimate Indiana Day Trip Travel Guide. The 747-page book includes a plethora of day trip destinations in Indiana. A complete tourism guide, the book includes local and state parks, museums, golf courses, and much, much more. The book includes information on all of Indiana's 92 counties. No traveler in Indiana should be without it. You can also order these books direct from me, the author, on the webpage. If you wish me to sign the book, just send me an email to mossyfeetbooks@gmail.com requesting a signed book and instructions on how you want me to address it. Note, if you send me an email, I will add you to my contact list. Readers on the list will receive an email from me announcing when I publish a new book. If you do not want me to add you to the list, tell me and I will not do that. Listeners to this podcast that want email notifications of my new releases can just send me an email requesting addition to the list. You can choose to have your name removed at any time. If you browse the website, you will find dozens of sample chapters, one for each of my books. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and thank you for listening.